Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me. I want to thank you for coming to Cybersecurity Made Simple. I'm very fortunate to have great people on the back office at LPL that really guide us through making sure that we do it so we can protect you. But I remember years ago, this is going back maybe 10 years now, I was at an event for JP Morgan and the chief information officer talked about cybersecurity awareness. And we all get it. We shouldn't use the same passwords. There's things we should do to protect ourselves. But two things hit me is, there are some very simple things that can be done so that doesn't stop us from doing the harder things. But especially nowadays where, breaches, they're just a thing. We know that eventually they're going to happen to a company. So it's important that you're listening to this. You can share the information with friends and family as this is going to be recorded and it will be on both my YouTube channel, which you can access through my website, athenewealth.com, or on the website under events. So this is something that you can play back to remind yourself of the things talked about or to share. So with that, welcome my experts from LPL.
Yes, thanks so much for that, Jenny.
Welcome.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're located. My name is Mike Terry, so I'll be your speaker today. And I just want to kind of sentiment those words by Jenny and just welcome you. I know that these topics aren't always the most exciting topics, right? I'm not sure not a lot of you talked about passwords over breakfast this morning, right? But they are important to kind of understand and to prioritize. And so that's really the purpose of today's webinar. So I want to just provide you with some useful information that you can implement within your life. As Jenny mentioned, share it with someone that's important to you so that they can stay a little safer. Hopefully, we'll all just be a little safer as we can kind of share some of these tips. So a little bit about me. I've been at LPL for over 8 years now. Worked in a number of different departments here and landed in technology about 4 years ago. So I've been in this role for a little over 4 years now. And my job is a pretty unique one. I have the pleasure of being able to work with different advisors around the country and educate them about cybersecurity best practices. In some situations, I'm able to educate their clients like yourself today. So this will be a pretty informal webinar, and what we'll do is at the end, we will open it up. So if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them at that point in time. All right, so let's review the agenda for today. We'll start just by talking about how your information is protected and safe. From there, we'll talk about different cyber attacks and scams and really just try to understand the minds of these bad actors a little bit better. And then to conclude the webinar, we'll talk about tips that you can do to secure your accounts and protect your information as well as protect your family. All right, so I think it's important just to start by giving a high-level definition of kind of what cybersecurity is, right? It's a term that's used pretty frequently, but it's really a pretty vague term when we talk about cybersecurity. And so for all intents and purposes, today in this webinar, we're really just talking about protecting sensitive information from unauthorized access, right? That information is very valuable to these bad actors. And once they're able to access that sensitive information, they will use it to commit fraud or for financial gain. And you should care because these bad actors are constantly evolving their tactics and they're targeting and trying to access, your sensitive information. So what's on the right-hand side of the screen, you see some different cyber attacks here. We'll work our way from the bottom and work up. So you have your espionage, your terrorism, and your warfare attacks. Honestly, these are going to be highly sophisticated, highly complex attacks that are going to be leading off the headline news, right? They're going to have impact here to our infrastructure within our country and elsewhere. So when we think about these types of attacks, lucky for us here at LPL and the Athene Wealth Management team, we're not going to be the direct target for these types of attacks. What we're really focusing on today are going to be social engineering attacks that come as the result of hackers, cyber criminals, or even you have that insider threat from time to time where you have those angry or disgruntled employees. So I think it's important that, we talk about just how your information is secure, and we are committed to ensuring that that information is protected. But we understand that it starts with you. We understand that, these are your accounts, and within these accounts, it's going to be your sensitive information, personal information, as well as your assets. And so our goal is to work hand in hand with our advisors to ensure that your information stays protected. And, Jenny and team are no exception to that. We provide them with recurring trainings on your annual basis so that, they're familiar with the cybersecurity landscape and that they have, different tips in their back pocket that they can use to identify and avoid some of these cyber threats. And then we have a personal relationships with advisors' offices as well. And Jenny and the Athene Wealth Management team are no exception to that either. So I've had, multiple communications with her leading up to the webinar or just in general. They've all been pleasant. So she knows if anything comes up related to cybersecurity, she can reach out to myself or a member of my team, right? And we'll make sure that we give her the information needed. Then lastly, we want, them to focus on what matters most, and that's satisfying you as a client, serving your needs, right, and continue to run a successful business. So we provide them with secure financial tools so that they can, adequately do their job and continue to keep that focus on you. And then here at LPL, we are kind of behind the scenes, right? We have a dedicated cyber staff, easily over 175 employees that are working, hard around the clock to ensure that, information is protected. If different threats are identified, we will proactively reach out to any advisors, try to help guide them and navigate any potential incidents as well. And then if there is an incident that occurs, advisors do receive some form of cyber insurance as a part of working with LPL. So at a very high level, this is kind of that ecosystem that's in place to ensure that your information is secure and protected. Another thing I wanted to just briefly mention, though, is LPL's cyber fraud guarantee, because this is a pretty unique thing here. It's not something that you see in a lot of, these financial institutions, but we have a public-facing cyber fraud guarantee that states that we'll reimburse you for any 100% of any realized losses in your impacted LPL accounts that occur directly as a result of any unauthorized access to an LPL system. And honestly, this is no different than the way that we've done business for years here as a company, but we did want to have something public facing for our advisors as a point of reference, for their clients or any prospects that may be thinking about joining an LPL affiliated firm. So if you're interested in learning more about some of these topics that I'll be discussing today, or specifically about the cyber fraud guarantee, you can visit lpl.com and go to that cybersecurity page. The easiest way to access it is probably just to search cybersecurity at LPL. On Google, but if you go to the lpl.com page or scroll to the security and privacy link at the bottom of the page and then subsequently go to the LPL cybersecurity page, we can learn more. Okay, so we'll move forward and we'll talk a bit about cyber attacks and some scams now. And as I mentioned before, we want to focus on social engineering. So these are going to be attacks that are designed to take advantage of human emotions. So that means that they won't work without you having some sort of emotional reaction, like clicking on a link, opening an attachment, or even calling a phone number back in some circumstances, right? So we'll start by talking about phishing. And these are going to be emails that are sent to large groups of people. Really, the goal is to get the recipient to click on a link or open an attachment that's included in the email. Once that link is clicked or that attachment is open, from time to time or often what we're seeing is ransomware can get deployed. What ransomware is, it's going to be malware that is actually going to essentially encrypt the files on your device or lock you out of those files. So you'll be able to see those files, but you won't be able to access them and see what's actually inside those files. The only way to get access back to those files is with the decryption key that these bad actors have, right? So they're going to request electronic payment, typically in the form of Bitcoin, in exchange for that decryption key so that you can get access back to your files. That's why these attacks are called ransomware, right? Just based off of that ransom payment. We have scams as well. So when we talk about scams, these are packaged hand in hand with phishing emails from time to time. Other times they're, designed specifically, outside of phishing, but the goal of these scams is to trick people into exposing information. It's depending on the target, it's going to depend on what information is exposed, whether it's personal information or proprietary information. And then when we talk about email impersonations, email is a popular form of communication. And if you don't have appropriate security surrounding your email account, that email account could get compromised or accessed in an unauthorized manner. And then once that occurs, bad actors could imitate you to commit fraud. So one of the things that's in place here at LPL, Jenny and team know that anytime that they receive a request to move assets from your LPL account, you're going to need to speak with someone from the firm, right? Just to verify that it is a legitimate request. So that's a good way to eliminate these email impersonations from occurring. But, we'll talk a little bit more about it later. But I would state that any sort of interaction that you have, if the interaction that you're having, that tone is very urgent, right? There's a sense of urgency associated with the conversation. You should probably proceed forward extremely cautiously, and do some additional steps to verify that it is a legitimate interaction that you're having. All right, so I talked about phishing. I'll briefly just talk about some red flags or common indicators associated with phishing emails. So look, I think in the past it was pretty easy to identify phishing emails, right? There were some common indicators, spelling or grammatical errors, an unknown sender, a sense of urgency within the email that was created. Those were all general telltale signs. So you could look at an email in the past and kind of tell whether or not if it was phishing or not. And that's the case now in some circumstances, but I'd argue with the popularity of generative AI tools, right? Like ChatGPT, for example. These phishing emails now are created, without those easily identifiable common indicators in them. So what we're asking people to do is kind of use their human intuition now, and thoroughly review emails before responding to ensure that they are legitimate emails, especially from individuals that you communicate with frequently. So we'll start just by talking about some red flags. If it's an unusual request or if that request has an unfamiliar tone, right? So I mentioned my communication leading up to the webinar has been pleasant with the team. If I were to receive an email, next week that had a sense of urgency to it, the tone was different than the prior communications that we've had, I'm going to call Jenny and ask her, to make sure everything's okay and confirm that it's a legitimate request. And so we make that recommendation for you as well. It needs to make sense. And if there is something that seems off with the communication, we recommend just calling that person to verify. Suspicious links or attachments, we talked about that earlier. That's kind of the bait as a result of these phishing emails, right? A lot of vagueness associated with those emails with just a link or an attachment, but really inconsistencies within the email addresses, links, or domain names is something that I really want to speak on for a moment. This is really going to be important when you're checking emails on your phone or on mobile devices like tablets or iPads. And the reason for that is a lot of times when you're checking emails on those devices, when you get the email, what do you see? You just see the name of the sender. So it's good best practice to click on the name of the sender, review the subsequent email address that comes up and make sure that there aren't any alterations with the email address, and make sure that email address matches, the name of the sender as well. So one tactic that bad actors use is called spoofing. Where they will slightly modify like a domain of an email address. So examples of that would be to like replace in a lowercase I with a lowercase L, or maybe even add like an extra S at the end of the domain. So that's why we just want you to use that human intuition and thoroughly review and ensure that the name matches the email address of the sender. All right, so I mentioned phishing attacks earlier. I just want to talk about some additional phishing attacks that are out there. These are real attacks. They have funny names, but I assure you they are real attacks, right? So we'll start by talking about smishing. So this is actually going to be phishing attacks that occur via text message. You'll get a text message from an unknown number with a link in the text message. A lot of times this may take you to like a landing page or another imitation page where you're tricked into exposing your credentials. So you're probably asking yourself, like, how exactly would that happen? So, excuse me, voice is going a little raspy here. I apologize. I'll say that this happened to me before, well before I was in security, right? But I actually fell victim to one of these attacks. So I'll make fun of myself for a moment and tell a story. So I was coming back from vacation out of town. and I received a text message to verify transactions with the bank that I was with at the time. So it made sense to me, right? My spending pattern was a little different than it normally is. So, and I had text message alerts set up with that bank as well. So I went to the text message, I clicked on the link, and I was taken to a landing page. I was asked to enter my username, my password, and my PIN number. And that should have been that aha moment for me there when I was asked to enter my PIN number. But no, I didn't realize it, and so I entered the information. Nothing happened. Thought this is strange. Let me enter it all again so I can verify the transactions, and nothing happened again. So I took a little closer look, and I had a moment of real trepidation because I realized one of the words was slightly misspelled on the landing page. And then when I went to access my account, all my information had already been changed. So I had to literally wait till the next day, take my ID to the bank, and submit a fraud claim to try to rectify the situation. So this is just one example as far as like the impacts of how this can occur. So some best practices to avoid falling victim to these types of attacks would be, really want to consider not responding to text messages from unknown phone numbers, right? If you get a text message from a number that you're not familiar with, like a very vague message like, are you home or how are you doing, right? You should resist the urge to respond back to those text messages. Phishing is another type of attack, right? So this is phishing that occurs, via the phone. So you see these with tech support scams a lot of times, but bad actors will get their victim on the phone, create a strong sense of urgency, or use strong technical language, try to convince their victim that there's an issue. A lot of times you may see them try to get remote access to a device with either deploy viruses or access sensitive information. So you should never provide remote access to any sort of unknown parties. If you haven't verified who that person is, you should never let them remotely access any of your devices. And if you get a call from a phone number that you're not familiar with, you can always have the option to disconnect that call and do some research on your own. So phishing is a newer one. This relates to like QR codes, scams associated with QR codes. So you see more and more QR codes out and about in public. And with these, you scan the QR code and then you click a link and you're taken to another page. So what bad actors are doing is they're putting malicious QR codes over legitimate QR codes, and they are using those malicious QR codes to commit fraud, by stealing credentials, having people to enter information that they shouldn't. So you should definitely try to avoid scanning QR codes in public unless you absolutely have to. And then another tip to avoid this one is that you should never be prompted to enter a password after you scan the QR code as well. All right, so we'll talk about elder fraud a bit here. And so this is information that we get from the Internet Crime Report that's released by the FBI on an annual basis. And so what we have here is a snapshot over the last 6 years, really, as far as with any trends that are associated, with this sort of fraud. So we look at here, let's just take a look at the number of victims. You see they peaked in 2020, and we're right at about the same amount last year as we were in 2020. But if we look at the losses as compared to the victims, you see the losses, have grown, incrementally over that same period of time, right? Looking at over 3 times as much losses, nearly $3.5 billion worth of losses last year. So you see that this is a real threat. And when we talk about this type of fraud, the reason that bad actors are having success is because they're able to gain the trust of their victims a lot of times. So they're contact individuals who may be lonely, or they may just randomly contact them and indicate that maybe they were, a past coworker, really just trying to get that connection, establish communication over an extended period of time, and then, commit fraud. So one of the things we're seeing here, romance and confidence scams is definitely one of the ways that these bad actors are having success. Lottery and sweepstakes scams as well is another one. We'll talk about tech support scams later, but that's another one. But I'll just talk a little bit about pig butchering, which is a scam. I know it's kind of a pretty vulgar term, but it is a legitimate scam that's happening where individuals are being tricked into fake cryptocurrency investing, right? So they'll meet someone And they'll take them to this cryptocurrency platform where they can make some smaller investments, and they call this scam pig butchering because they kind of fatten up their victim, and then they take everything from them, right? So you make smaller investments, and then you make a larger investment into this cryptocurrency platform, and then the platform either disappears or your money's gone. So you should always think about a couple of things as it relates to just fraud in general. If you're unsure of the interaction that you're having, if you're unsure if it's legitimate or not, you should immediately cease that interaction. Speak with a trusted contact, right? Speak with someone that you trust and explain the details of what's going on and see, what their opinion is on it, if they think that it could be legitimate or if it could be fraud. All right, so talked about investment scams a bit, kind of with the pig butchering as it relates to that cryptocurrency, but there are other investment scams out there as well where individuals may imitate like financial advisors and indicate a low risk, high reward investment opportunity, right? One where there's really not any sort of risk, you won't lose any money, and you're going to have a guaranteed, rate of return. So that old saying, if something sounds too good to be true, it normally is. It definitely would be applicable right here in this circumstance. So if you are approached with a situation like this, we'd actually recommend you speak with Jenny and team, right? Kind of have a conversation with them, explain the details to see, if they're comfortable, if they've heard of that investment, or if they have any guidance that they could offer. Invoice scams we see with phishing a lot of times, especially phishing of email impersonations associated with like businesses, third parties. What will happen here is you'll get an email indicating that there's a service that either has already been paid, right, or that needs to be paid, and you're not going to be familiar with that service or with that company. One trend that we're seeing here associated with invoice scams is that the emails won't have any text within the body of them. So you get literally just an email with an invoice in it and an option to pay. And so, that's one of the indicators there that it could potentially be fraud. And then tech support scams. So these occur when you get like fake pop-ups on your device indicating that there's an issue with your device. So the red flag here, the common indicator is one, these large companies aren't going to proactively reach out to you and let you know that there's an issue with your device. And then, they're definitely not going to provide you with a phone number. So that phone number is going to be that red flag or that common indicator that this could potentially be a tech support scam. Okay, so let's talk about what to do if you fall victim to one of these attacks. Hopefully it won't be anyone here, but let's just talk about it. So first and foremost, you should change your passwords to your accounts. If you're using similar passwords on other accounts, make sure you change those as well. Then you should check your accounts, make sure there's not anything unusual or abnormal occurring with your account activity. If there is, you should immediately, work to reclaim access to the account. But that could be that indication that, your information be exposed. So we'd recommend that you reach out to Jenny and team. Let them know that you may be having a possible situation. What they'll do is they'll work with us here at LPL. And we can add heightened monitoring to your account, right, to try to prevent any additional fraud from occurring. And lastly, you want to educate yourself. You're already doing that by listening to this today, but continue to do that, right? Don't let today's interaction be the first or the last one that you have, right? So you want to continue to have those interactions as far as with continuing to learn, listen to podcasts, go to other webinars if you can as well, so that you can kind of stay in the know. All right, so now we will talk about some things that you can do to secure your accounts. I'm sure a number of you have different accounts with multiple companies, so let's just generally talk about best practices for securing accounts and information. So we'll start by talking about backing up your data when we talk about securing information. These are some pretty convenient options that are going to allow you to back up data if you want to store it in a secondary place. The first one's going to be the cloud or cloud storage. So you hear people reference the cloud all the time. And when we talk about the cloud, we're really just talking about the ability to sync your data in another location that's offsite or not where you're located. So a lot of these cloud storage companies, they have secure data warehouses really in locations all over the world, right? And so when you're using the cloud, you are using one of the secure servers in those warehouses to sync and store your data. So that's why it's called the cloud. So this is the most convenient option to back up your data, but not everyone is, comfortable using the cloud. That's fine. If you want to manually back up your data, there are some options available for you. An external hard drive is a good option for you, as well as an encrypted USB drive. With the external hard drive, make sure that you have encryption on it, right? Just to ensure that if it's lost or stolen, the data is on it protected. And the same thought process for the USB. And then if this is the route you're going, you just want to make sure, that these drives are held in a safe space as well. All right, now we'll talk about passwords. I kind of made light of it earlier that not a lot of us were talking about passwords over breakfast this morning, but passwords are an important topic. We really want to think about them as the keys to your kingdom. Let's take it a step further. Think about them as the keys to your house, or think about them as the keys to your car. Let's use the car as the example, right? If you're out and about later on today, and someone asks you if they can get the keys to your car so that they can drive it around the block to see how it drives, right? You'll probably look at them like they're crazy, right? Like, no way. Your password should be thought about in the same way, right? You want to protect them. You shouldn't provide them really to anyone, and you want to ensure that they have the appropriate length of complexity to them. So when creating your passwords, you don't want to use personal information. You should also avoid dictionary words because these bad actors can use these password cracking tools, and if you have personal information or dictionary words in there, they may be able to crack that password in a quicker manner. You shouldn't reuse your passwords as well. So password managers are a great way to avoid reusing passwords. I strongly believe that you should use password managers if you haven't already done so. They will allow you to manage complex passwords over multiple platforms. So you can manage them. You can access that password manager on your phone, on your laptop, your desktop, your tablet, etc. With that password manager, though, you are going to need to have the longest and strongest password that you can remember to protect that password manager, because that's where all your passwords are housed. And so a great way that you can do that is to utilize a phrase technique, right? And so please don't use this phrase because I've done hundreds of these webinars and I always use this as the example. So make advisors' jobs easy, right, is a good example of this. You wouldn't know I worked with financial advisors unless you were a coworker or a colleague of mine. It's easy for me to remember, but I think the best thing about it is that it's 19 characters in length, right? And there's some things that you can do to kind of remove those dictionary words that I was referencing earlier, right? So maybe you replace an A with the @ symbol. You could replace like the letter E with a 3. You could replace an I with an exclamation point, an O with a 0. There are a number of different things that you could do. You could add a sequence of numbers at the end, right? Whatever works best for you. But those are some tips as far as creating those long and complex passwords. And it's been proven that the longer your password is, the more secure and protected your account is. So this diagram right here probably gets, the most questions when I do these webinars, and for good reason, right? So if we look at an 8-character password that has numbers, upper and lowercase letters and symbols, it would take approximately 5 minutes to go through every possible combination. But if we double the length of that password to 16 characters, you're looking at, 5 billion years. I don't know about you, right? I'm sure I'm sleeping a little better at night when I'm thinking about, 5 billion years versus 5 years. And obviously this chart isn't exact, right? This is just estimation based on, the brute force technology. And we did get this from a third party publisher that we use. But you kind of get the drift of what we're stating here, right? The longer and more complex your password is, stronger your accounts are going to be protected. So I'll challenge you a bit. If your passwords are purple or even red, it's probably time to think about changing that password to a longer, more complex password. All right, so having a strong password is a good first step for protecting your accounts, but I think that multi-factor authentication is an essential step as well and should be added to your account. So MFA or 2FA is how it's often referred to as. It's just going to be that authentication process that requires you to complete 2 steps before you can access an account. So the first step, you have to verify something that you know. That's going to be your username and your password. And then that second step, you have to verify something that you have, and that's going to be a unique code. It's typically going to be sent to you via text message. If you have an authentication app, it'll be sent directly to the authentication app. Some people have like a key fob that they're used, right? You can verify the code there. Whatever that process is, you won't be able to access the account without that second verification step. And so the thought process behind MFA is that, if your credentials, username and password are exposed, well, your account's still protected based off of that second step verification requirement. All right, so we've made it through 3 of the 4 sections. Again, I thank you for your time and attention. Promise you that we're almost through. We're going to talk a little bit about protecting your family, protecting your homes. And so start by talking about the internet, and you're going to hear me talk about updating software throughout this entire section. So I'll just go through my spiel now. It's very important to update software. With the amount of technologies out there and the amount of software that's being used, there's flaws out there in software that's currently being used, right? And so what bad actors are able to do is they're able to exploit these flaws, these known vulnerabilities, or sometimes even unknown vulnerabilities, but they're able to exploit them, via these different issues with the operating systems. And so by updating your operating system or software to the latest version, you're going to eliminate, these bad actors from being able to exploit those known vulnerabilities. So make sure you're updating software, really everywhere. This slide we're talking about the internet, so it would be applicable to like internet browser and plugins, etc. But make sure that all your software is up to date on your devices. You should always use a VPN or virtual private network if you're connected to a public Wi-Fi. Unsecure public Wi-Fi. So an unsecure public Wi-Fi network is going to be any sort of Wi-Fi network that does not require a password for you to join it, or if that password is just plastered somewhere publicly, you don't know who's on that network, it's not going to be secure. So we recommend that you use a VPN if you must use one of those public Wi-Fi networks. It's going to provide you like a secure tunnel. It's going to allow you to anonymously browse. Another great option or alternative would be to use a mobile hotspot from your phone, which would provide you, with that secure internet connection that only you could use. We also recommend that you use credit cards or third-party apps when you're making payments online, right? Definitely try to limit the amount of sensitive information that you're typing online, like routing number and account number. So by using your credit card or a third-party app to make a payment, you still making payments, for those desired products, but you're not necessarily overexposing information. And then you should only share information on legitimate, secure websites. So a great way to a great first step to confirm if a website's legitimate or secure would be to take a look at the URL at the beginning, and that URL should start with HTTPS. You can even think of the S as standing for secure, right? It's going to be accompanied by a lock oftentimes. All right, now we'll talk about mobile devices. So we talk about mobile devices, we're talking about tablets, cell phones, etc. Some of you may be on a mobile device today, and I think there is a misconception associated with mobile devices that they cannot get, viruses or malware. That's not the case. They absolutely can, but I think for us here, I think the bigger threat to them would be for them not to have a password, and then if they're lost or stolen, whoever accesses them really doesn't have any limitation as far as what information they have access to. So make sure you have added the appropriate password or PIN or pattern to your mobile devices. If you want to use or enable biometrics, which is that facial recognition, that thumbprint software, definitely would recommend you can use that as well. Make sure you're updating your software regularly on these devices as well. So I have an iPhone, seems like every other week I get a notification about updating to the newest version of iOS, but I talked earlier about the benefits of using that latest version of software. As it relates to apps, you want to only install apps from, trusted and official app stores, right? And then we'd also recommend that you try to focus on using those legacy apps. Sometimes those newly created apps are still going to have some flaws included in them as well. You can always review the comments before downloading an app too. Since we're talking about apps, I'll state that if you have old apps on your devices that you're no longer using, my question to you is why? If you're no longer using those apps, go ahead and delete them from your device. And then for the apps that you are using, make sure that you have the appropriate permissions associated with them as well. So a game like Candy Crush shouldn't have access to my microphone or to my camera because it's a one-person game as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about the Internet of Things, or IoTs. These are really going to be any devices that have a sensor and that are connected to the internet. So I'm sure you have a number of these at homes, right? These will include all the Alexa products. They are, vacuum cleaners now, refrigerators, AC units, right? Grills, right? Toasters, the list goes on and on and on. Televisions. I could sit here all day and talk about these. But anything that you have that's connected to the internet in your home with the sensors and IoT, and so you should make sure you have the latest version of software on that tool or that product or application. You should also make sure that you're changing the passwords from the default password that they came with, and then make sure that each device has a unique and separate password. You should also make sure that you're enabling multi-factor authentication if possible. And then, if it's your preference, you should probably consider opting out of data tracking if that makes sense as well for you. All right, I'll briefly just talk about some tips for traveling safe. I know summer's winding down, but it's still good to kind of always be aware of just general best practices. So you should always stay vigilant, always be aware of your surroundings when you're out in public, right? Never leave any sort of devices unattended in public places. We'd recommend that you use a portable charger when you're traveling. There are some minor risks if you use like public USB charging ports, and it's not always easy to find a public outlet, to charge. So with a portable charger, you can get 1 to 2 full charges, on your device as you're traveling, and then it's just going to eliminate any anxiety as far as with low battery life. You should learn about local scams as well, so you can just do a quick Google search in the area for your destination before you go so that you don't fall victim to any scams. And we talked about some of the risks as far as the public Wi-Fi, mobile hotspot, or a VPN are going to be great alternatives for that. All right, so let's talk about protecting your identity a bit. Jenny mentioned it at the beginning of the call beautifully, right? We're all consumers in some form or fashion. I think it's a little naive of us as consumers to think that our information hasn't been included in some data breach along the way, right? And so, with that being the case, a good first step to protecting your identity is just making sure that you freeze your credit. It's actually a pretty easy process. You can actually go online, you just establish an account with the credit bureaus. You simply click a button to initiate freezing your credit. By freezing your credit, you're preventing any new accounts from being opened using your information. But it's not going to impact any of your existing accounts at all. So these bad actors, if they have your information, they can't go and open that new credit card or take out money from a new loan because your credit's frozen. And when that bank goes to run that information, it won't be applicable. You should also review the account activity regularly for your accounts just to make sure that there's not anything unusual going on with your accounts. It's always good to be aware of those phishing emails that we were referencing earlier, and then make sure you have strong passwords on all of your accounts to protect them adequately. I mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. Passwords are the one risk that you directly control with all of your accounts, right? You determine how long and how complex each password is for your account. All right, so this is the last slide. We'll talk a bit about just protecting your family. When we talk about cyberbullying, we really want to talk about it from both sides of the fence. Unfortunately, there've just been a lot of impulsive decisions made by, adolescents as a result of cyberbullying. You can just kind of do some searches, right, and see. It's a very unfortunate thing. So you want to have conversations with those young people in your life. Just let them know that, it's real consequences associated with the actions surrounding cyberbullying. It's just not okay to do. And then on the other side of the fence, if they are falling victim to this bullying, you want to be there for them to support them, to make sure that you can help them through any situation they have, so they don't do anything impulsive. Should also take precautions on social media. Good way to do that is probably to like create an account and just follow those loved ones in your life, kind of be a fly on the wall. Probably won't win you any awards for being the best family member, but it will allow you to ask pointed questions, right? We want to make sure that those individuals are connected with people that they know. Unfortunately, there are a lot of predators in society, and there's nothing stopping these predators for creating, these accounts that could mimic adolescent males or females, and now they're, communicating with those loved ones in our life, and that's the last thing that we would want. So by taking precautions on social media, you can ask those pointed questions like who is this person? How do you know them? And for individuals that may have like a large following on social media as well, we'd also recommend that they create like a private account for themselves where they post more private content, and they use that public platform for more general type of posts that wouldn't be specific or easily identifiable for them. We also recommend creating a password or a safe word for your family. A lot of times, if there's a situation where active fraud is occurring, may not always be thinking clearly. And by adding that safe word or that password, it just allows another authentication step to be completed before any actions can take place. And then last one, I mentioned it before, but just keep learning, right? Continue to learn about these different threats and how they will continue to evolve so that you won't fall victim to them as well. And with that, you've made it through. So thanks so much for your time and attention. Couple of things to remember, right? We are committed to working hand in hand with Jenny and team to making sure that their cybersecurity needs are, taken care of. Also, remember that these social engineering attacks are designed to take advantage of you. So don't click on any links. Don't open any attachments from unknown sources. Don't call phone numbers back. If you have any interaction that you feel uncomfortable with, immediately cease that interaction. Make sure you value security over convenience with everything that you do. And then last but not least, make sure that you protect your accounts and protect your family as well. All right, thank you so much for your time today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, I will open it up for a Q&A now. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and we will unmute you and answer any questions that you might have. So I'm not seeing any hand raised right now, which is completely fine. If we don't have anyone's hands raised or questions come up, you can just reach out to Jenny and team. And I mentioned before, we have a great relationship with them. They'll follow up with me and the team will get you the information needed. Jenny, it looks like you have your hand raised though. Do you have a question?
Well, I don't have a question, but I just want to note something. So you talked about apps. And look, we're always on our phones. When I go for breakfast in the morning, I'm checking work email, but we're always on our phones. So when you're in front of the TV, when you're killing time, the best thing you can do. So take it in steps, right? Because it's a lot of information. We say, oh my gosh, I have to change all my passwords. I have to do this. We don't do anything. Go through your phone, remove apps. Don't just delete it from the home screen. Remove your apps that you don't use. And for the ones that you do use, go into your settings to make sure that location, camera, whatever doesn't need to be on, isn't on. That's a really easy first step for you. For VPN, I use a VPN. It's on my phone as well as my computers. It's not a recommendation, but I use Nord. I believe it's Nord. I've used that one for ages. So, that's a good one that you might look to. And then for password encryption, I use Keeper, Keeper, and that's on my phone and that's on all of my devices. And it's been easy to use. And these are all really affordable. So I just thought I'd throw that out there because people just don't know where to start. Okay?
Yeah. No,
Okay.
and I'd say, so we can't make any specific recommendations.
No,
Those are all
that's
great
just what
industry
I do,
leaders.
but It works
Yeah.
for me. Check it out.
Yeah, and I'll give the group a resource as well, right? If you want to learn more about those products or any other products, right? PCMag.com. So PCMAG.com is a great resource. So if you want to go and check out what the best VPN is, right? You can just go
Oh, okay.
search for the best VPN. It'll provide you with an exhaustive list on there, right? And you can kind of determine what's best for you. Same thing with password managers, right? Keepers on there. So you can definitely go there. And then if you have questions, right, they can reach out to you. You'll reach out to us, and we'll make sure that any information that's needed, we'll provide it. So
Great. Thanks,
awesome.
everybody.
All right. So I think we don't have any other questions. So I think we'll conclude the webinar. Have a great day, and thanks for your time.